join me please in a minute's silence. Thank you very much. I called this extraordinary meeting at short notice to discuss the incident that took place in London yesterday. I think it's right that we should be meeting today. There are, as always, a couple of formal matters. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, we've received apologies from Assembly Member Arnold, Assembly Member Badenoch and Assembly Member Shah.
Right. And are there any declarations of interest? Thank you very much. When we wake up in the morning, we expect to be able to come to work and to go about our daily business as we usually do. When members of the emergency services and the police wake up in the morning, they have no idea what they are going to be expected to do. All they know is that they are the servants of Londoners, they are public servants, and they will have to take whatever comes their way. Yesterday, in the case of those people who were killed and injured yesterday, particularly the police officers, they were willing, as they are every single day, to put themselves in harm's way to protect the rest of us so that we can go about our daily business. And it is right that we, as the representatives of Londoners, should meet here today to express our gratitude to the work that they continue to do and to express our sorrow for what has happened to those who were killed and injured yesterday. The willingness of members of the emergency service to put themselves at risk in the service of the people, in the service of freedom, is what terrifies terrorists. And it is the mark of a free society that people are willing to do this, and that people, brave people, will do this for the freedom and the liberty of us all. London has lived through many such events in its history, and London has always survived. London carries on. The announcement during the war, we have all seen it, keep calm and carry on, really is the hallmark of London. And it is right, and this afternoon I saw that Westminster Bridge was open again and that London was working again, demonstrates that. I think it's right that we should debate this motion this afternoon. The motion not only expresses our sorrow at what happened, but it also demonstrates our pride and our gratitude that there are people who are willing to do these things for us, and it shows our determination that we and the capital and this country continues to be open, and we will carry on, and we wish to thank them. I move the motion in my name. Assembly Member Duval.
Thank you very much. The tragedy of yesterday, the loss of victims, the families that are grieving today and coming to terms with their losses, and those that were caught up with the evils of extremism, of wanting to cause terror and harm in our community. And in terms of this motion today, we are going to reaffirm, not just in terms of the sorrow of the tragedy of yesterday, but reaffirm our commitment to tackle those evils in its many forms that wants to cause harm to our communities. And in doing so, rejecting the values and visions that they have compared to the values that the majority of this country, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, wish to see and go forward. We are a liberal, tolerant country. We decide our views and disagreements by debate. We do not take to physical violence in terms of trying to put our point of views across. That's what's good about this democracy and the notions of it. So in doing that in this motion, let's be very clear. It is about recognising the losses that we faced yesterday, the suffering and the sorrow that's caused by these horrific events that occur not just in this country but internationally. That we have some solidarity with those that have been caught up in many of these terrorist attacks. So in seeking justice for what occurred yesterday, we must reinvigorate and be more further vigilant in terms of our opposition, in terms of what the extremists want to achieve. And in doing so, we must also reflect and reject the serene voices in our own community who seek to offer simplistic solutions to the problems and challenges our professional services face. It is not easy to deal with terrorism. It's not easy to confront and contest those who want to cause violence, but there is no simplistic solution. There is no scapegoating of communities wholesale in terms of what we face. Because that's when the terrorist wins, really. If they can divide us off from the mainstream to the extremes, then actually they succeed. Because what they want to do is try to do that. It's not just causing fear, it is determined to separate people out, that actually their arguments are winning and ours. And by turning on ourselves, that's why I think we do need to reflect. Commentators, pseudo-politicians, wherever they are, if they think they're being helpful, they're not. Because at this period of time, as the chair says, we need a calm and thoughtful response. And as we've seen today, our professional agencies are moving on a number of fronts, and it's rightly so in terms of understanding what took place, learning the lessons, but also bringing the associates to justice in terms of the outrage that's been caused. And I just want to then move on in terms of some of the issues around issues of solidarity. What brings us, what unites us against the few that are committed to cause us harm and create that terror? So what unites us? It is our values, even though we're in this chamber we are politically opposed at times, but there are strong values that unite us, and why we need to make sure that whether it's in this country or whether it's abroad, that those who want to commit extremist activities, there will be consequences. There will be consequences. We will seek to protect, with a proportionate act, the people in this great city and hopefully in this country. And whilst it's wrong to talk about the successes that have been had, we need to remember that our professional agencies have protected us against 13 potential terrorism activities. Now, in terms of going forward, we need to actually refocus, we need to think further, and we need to build on those issues that do protect us, and also come to terms with the event yesterday. Sadly, it occurred, and we should reflect, as we've done already, and we will continue to do so, I think, on the coming days, and reflect about those services who did an incredible response. Words fail in terms of the response yesterday that took place there, that we know that the work that we've undertaken in preparation for events such as this does pay off. And I want to pay tribute to not just the police service, the emergency service, but security agencies as well, because we need to really think about, we need to reflect on what's occurred yesterday, reflect on the past, but also we need to keep thinking further forward. And one last point, Chair, I want to make, and it's important. International cooperation is going to be key here. Whatever the lessons that I've learned, because when we contest the ground against the extremists, wherever they may exist, in whatever forms they exist, we really need to be united in going forward on this across where those that have got a common cause. And that's why it's important for us about some of the issues around the European debate, not to reopen the issues of the referendum, but that international cooperation that takes place with us and those on the mainland Europe is going to be paramount for our safety, as well as sharing some of that intelligence we've got. So there are some issues that we need to do. No knee-jerk responses, but they're very important issues that we need to resolve in the coming months in terms of negotiations. But equally, we need to resolve here that we're committed against tackling the evils that exist, the small number that perpetuate crimes such as that existed yesterday, that we're going to be determined to make sure, as scrutineers, that we're going to do the right thing by the services we scrutinise, and the Mayor, that we encourage decision makers. The Mayor has made, I think, a very important contribution along with our Prime Minister in terms of resolving those issues, that we're not going to be divided, we're not going to be coward, and that we will contest the ground and we will seek to continue to protect our communities, not just here in London, because the Met has a wider responsibility to the nation. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Bacon.
Mr Chairman, colleagues, the shocking events of yesterday afternoon, I think, will live with all of us for a very long time indeed. To see such tragedy unfold on the streets of our city, I think, was heart-wrenching. Perpetrators of attacks, such as the one that occurred in Westminster yesterday, are hate-filled cowards who view people simply as anonymous targets. And I think we need to be clear about this. It takes no courage whatever to mow down unsuspecting pedestrians, including children, and then use weapons to attack an unarmed man. There is no honour in doing so, and there is no greater cause being served in carrying out such atrocities. The victims of yesterday's senseless attack are not mere statistics. They are not anonymous targets. They are part of our society, and they're part of what makes us who we are. PC Keith Palmer was a constituent of mine. I did not know him, but I have two close relatives who are both serving police officers, and they both did know him. Our former colleague, James Cleverley, served alongside him in the Royal Artillery. He leaves behind a wife and children. He is not a faceless, anonymous target. And similarly, the people that were wounded and killed on Westminster Bridge are not anonymous targets to be opportunistically disposed of. Perpetrators of atrocities like yesterday's are rightfully condemned. But as the Prime Minister remarked earlier today, although yesterday we saw the very worst of humanity, we also saw the very best of it. And speaking personally, I am never prouder of my city, and indeed of my country, than when I witness how we respond to adversity. The passers-by who tended to the wounded and the dying on Westminster Bridge yesterday, as an example, the emergency services who acted so impressively in containing and controlling the situation, and I would defy anybody not to be moved by the pictures of Tobias Elwood, covered in blood, as he displayed selfless courage in fighting, ultimately vainly, to save PC Palmer's life. Similarly, the reaction of the people of the city who refused to be cowed and are quietly going about their business today as they would normally demonstrates our refusal to give in. And I think that the Mayor was quite right yesterday in what he said about, in our society, Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, people of other faiths, people of no faith, can live peacefully side by side and succeed together. We live in a democracy. We live in a society where people are free to hold different points of view, as Lendeval has just said. And like Parliament, this place, this building, is a living embodiment of that principle. And I believe the actions of so many people yesterday demonstrated the very best of us, alongside one action which demonstrated the very worst. We will go on. And I think in the face of such solidarity, the peddlers of division, hatred and intolerance, such as the perpetrator of yesterday's attack, will never, ever defeat us. Thank you.
Assembly Member Russell.
We stand together here in this chamber, united by our sorrow for those who were killed yesterday, and our compassion for those who were injured, and our pride in the way that our police officers, emergency services, doctors, nurses, and ordinary Londoners responded so bravely in the face of senseless violence. On behalf of the Green Group, I want to pay tribute to the lives that were lost, and our thoughts go out to those who were injured and are currently being treated, and also to the families, friends and colleagues of all those directly affected by this awful tragedy. We must pay a particular tribute to PC Keith Palmer. We are truly in his debt. And I believe this terrible act will not dent the spirit of London, and that we are right to stand here in solidarity, to stand up for democracy and against terror and against those who would divide us. I support the motion.
Remember Whittle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and also for calling this meeting and putting this passage forward, because I would like to join with Assembly Member Duval, Bacon and Russell in adding my complete support for the motion, and on behalf of our group here, condolences to the people who were killed yesterday and the people who were injured. This is something which I personally, have had some experience of before, living in Woolwich when Lee Rigby was murdered. And what happens then is, well, as has been mentioned, people suddenly come into their own. They remain calm and they help, like we saw yesterday, and it is truly moving. And, I go into Westminster a lot and I see the armed policemen with their guns at the entrance to Westminster Tube. And I find it extraordinarily reassuring that they are there, that they're so good-natured, when they are doing an appalling job, which is becoming one which is increasing, unfortunately, and increasing in its need. And also, I come to work sometimes on the Thames Clipper, and you're going up the river and it seems like the safest thing to be doing. But then this week I saw in the paper there was a drill being done by the security services to prepare for a possible attack from a pleasure boat on the Thames. And of course it does slightly change your perspective on things, but I think it is without question a great gesture that we have come together to show our support for all of us in London and for the security services and the people who died yesterday. So on behalf of the UKIP group, I utterly completely support this motion. Thank you.
Assembly Member Pidgeon.
Thank you very much. The horrors we saw on the streets yesterday are a fundamental attack on London, on our country, our parliament, our democracy, our way of life, our British values. It's quite horrific, I think is the only word I can use. We obviously have to remember and should remember the huge sacrifice of PC Keith Palmer, and our thoughts go out to his wife, his children, his wider family and colleagues in the Met. And I think many of us will have been watching the news last night to see the acting Deputy Commissioner visibly shaken when talking about this loss of life last night. And our thoughts also must be with those who have been killed and seriously injured and their families. Their lives will never be the same again, and they will live with this for the rest of their lives. And as Assembly Member Bacon has said, our thoughts should be also with James Cleverly, former Assembly Member who has lost a friend, and he said in Parliament today that PC Palmer was a strong professional public servant. And those of us who know James know that he's not a man for public emotion, but seeing him speaking today, holding back his tears in the House of Commons, really reminds us of the loss of human life and what it really means. I also want to put on record my thanks to the emergency services, not just the frontline ones we saw, but there's also the support services behind the scene who do so much when we have such major incidents taking place. But what happened yesterday is nothing to do with religion and genuine religion and religious belief. Just as a whole other number of terrorist attacks, people of all faiths and none have been killed and injured. We faced other attacks in the past, July 2005, others since, and throughout the 70s, 80s and 90s. And we also faced as a city terrible bombing during World War II. But Londoners have never been coward. Londoners will not give up what they value. We're a proud city, a city which values and celebrates diversity and welcomes people from across the world. And we are outward looking. You know, today London has carried on. We've seen it as we've gone about our business. Parliament has rightly carried on. And we will defeat those who try to attack us and our fundamental freedoms by carrying on. But I've just been speaking to some students at King's College London, young international women students, who were shocked by what had happened. They were angered by it, but they strongly felt that London must carry on as a tolerant, diverse and united place. I fully support them and I support the motion today.
Thank you. I'd like to add my thoughts and sympathy to all those affected by yesterday's events. The victims that were killed, their families, friends and colleagues, and those seriously injured. People who've made their lives here, people who've lived here all their lives, and those visiting our city. We saw lives lost and lives devastated. Yesterday, as Assemblymember Bacon said, we saw both the worst and the best of humanity. We saw a terrorist determined to kill, the absolute worst of humanity, determined to strike fear into the hearts of Londoners, and determined to divide our city, to make us feel less safe. And we can't and we won't let that happen. Our emergency services risk their lives for us day in and day out. And in the tragic case of PC Keith Palmer, give our lives for us in defence of our way of life and our democratic values. We saw the best of humanity yesterday as well, and the response of bystanders and of our emergency services has already been mentioned, and that should make us proud both of their actions and what they and we and London stand for. As Chair of the London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority, I'd like to thank all emergency services for their response, and particularly the London Fire Brigade, whose officers were involved both on land and on the river, on the fireboat based just across the Thames from the House of Parliament. The training and professionalism that goes into ensuring that they know how to respond rapidly and appropriately, and the cross-agency working that this involves does credit to them. I'm immensely proud and grateful for their work, as I know all members of the Fire Authority are, and this dedication is clearly recognised by this Assembly in the motion. We should also thank our security staff here at City Hall as well. They do a fabulous job and it's hugely appreciated by all of us. We should be proud of London's values, and these have been mentioned by previous speakers. These are values that bind our city together and unite us on the worst days we can imagine, including the last 24 hours or so. Tolerance, diversity and a determination not to allow hate to triumph or to divide us. We should always remember and celebrate these values as we commemorate those who've died. And I'm pleased we're able to do this as an Assembly representing London today. Above all, as the news emerges today, it is clear that there were people with their origins from around the world, both Londoners and visitors, who were victims of yesterday's attack. I want to finish by quoting the Ben Ockrey poem that we don't actually often read as Assembly members because it's on the wall on the public entrance to this building. It's a poem about the richness of our culture and our city and essentially its values. Ockrey's poem includes the phrase, "Here lives the great music of humanity, the harmonisation of different histories, cultures, geniuses and dreams." Unfortunately, yesterday, some of those dreams became nightmares, but as an Assembly and as a city, it's the harmonisation of different people and cultures, of people of every faith and none, that represents our values and what we should focus on as we move forward from this dreadful attack, both on London, on our values and on our democracy. Thank you.
Remember Dismal.
Thank you, Chair. The last time I had to speak on an occasion like this was after the 7th of July riots, when I was in Parliament. The day before, we'd been locked down, as Parliament was yesterday. And the day before that, we had been celebrating the fact that we'd just been awarded the Olympics. So how things change and how rapidly they change. And it is right to say that whilst the security at Westminster gets ratcheted up, as it does across the whole of London, the police officers continue to maintain their good humour in the way that they deal with the public. So I also would like to pay tribute to PC Keith Palmer. And I'd like to say a little message to his family as well. My father was killed on public duty when I was 11. So I know the pain and grief that that family is now going through. And it lasts a long time. But eventually, that pain and grief falls away and the happy memories start to predominate. And I'd simply say to them, in due course, many years perhaps from now, those happy memories will start to take the place of the pain, and you remember a father and a husband for the good times, not just what happened tragically yesterday. When we pay tribute to the police, I'd also like to pay tribute to the borough police officers out in the streets in outer London, in inner London. They've had their leave cancelled, they've come into duty, and they're out there to reassure the public, to reinforce the message of community cohesion, which Assemblymember Duval mentioned earlier on. It's very easy for us to remember those who rush around in the fast cars with the firearms, dealing with this immediate terrorist threat, and not remember the ordinary bobbies on the beat who are out doing the job, day in, day out, in the streets, in my constituency in Barnet and Camden, and everybody else's borough as well. And I'd like to pay tribute also to my borough commander in Barnet in particular, who's been brilliant at keeping us up to date with what's been going on both at Westminster and also, more importantly, what's been going on in the constituency. There's been a lot of strain on community cohesion recently from various events which I won't go into. I think we all know what they are. And I think it is instrumental to remember, of course, that the perpetrator was UK born. He wasn't a migrant, as some people would like to use this as an opportunity to attack migrants. He wasn't. He was UK born. And one of the things we really do have to try and understand is why people who are UK born end up doing these terrible, terrible things. If there was an answer to it, I'm sure we'd have it by now, but there isn't so far, and that is something we must always remember and always must work against. I also echo the tributes that have been paid to the emergency services. But one of the problems that always happens is when these events start to die down, and when the tributes have been paid, we forget that they need the resources to do the job. And one thing that has come loud and clear from this Assembly, I think pretty unanimously, is that we have to make sure that the police and the fire service and the ambulance service are properly resourced for London. And I hope that the government and the Prime Minister, having made those tributes, doesn't forget what happened in terms of the response of our emergency services yesterday, and make sure that they are fully and properly resourced into the future. And if more resources are needed, once the full circumstances are known, then those resources must, of course, be provided. So, I echo everything else that everybody else has said today. I hope that PC Palmer's family, and indeed all the other bereaved families, recognise that in the long term, the pain does go away. But in the end, Londoners have come together and have come together very well, and those who would seek to divide us will find their message completely refuted by the response of London and Londoners.
We have our own emergency here in the chamber. An ambulance is shortly going to come to collect a security guard. Can I ask those of you who wish to speak further on this motion, speak briefly so that we can come to a conclusion, please. Assemblymember Eshalomi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday's incident felt very real to me because I've been walking up and down that bridge for a number of appointments in the last few weeks. And just last Friday, my younger sister had her first baby at St. Thomas's. I was late for that, so essentially I ended up taking the bus over the bridge instead of walking. And when you walk over that bridge, the amount of people that you see just going about their daily business, you see tourists, you see people rushing from work, you see young children, and it just shows that why London is a great city. I think it is important that we recognise the hard work of all our different emergency services. And, again, I echo and add my tributes to a number of the tributes that we've already heard this afternoon. I also want to pay tribute to some of the staff across our public transport network system as well. The staff on the underground and the staff on all the different bus drivers. Again, who are helping to reassure a number of people when some of the stations, especially Westminster, was on lockdown. I think it's important for us to continue to be an open city and we continue to celebrate our diversity. And I'm happy to welcome that I was able to welcome a group of young people from my constituency to this chamber yesterday. And we must continue to make sure that our young people continue to visit the heart of democracy. Thank you.
Can I put the motion? to the Assembly, please. Those in favour of the motion, please.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Meeting is over.
GLA Chamber Sound.